2025, and welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. I'm Hendeleva, Manager of Podcast and Audio Initiatives here at Race Forward. In this critical episode, Glenn Harris, President of Race Forward, and Eric Ward, Executive Vice President of Race Forward, engage in a timely discussion about the profound challenges facing all of us as Donald Trump has returned to the presidency. Framed around the dire implications of an authoritarian agenda, they explore the escalating threats to multiracial democracy, the flurry of executive orders issued during his first week back in office, and reflect on Project 2025, a roadmap to dismantling the past gains and future progress of an inclusive multiracial democracy in this country. They leave listeners with a deeper understanding of what's at stake and how we can stand together to protect the progress towards a multiracial democratic society.
Welcome to Momentum, Race Forward's podcast. My name is Glenn Harris. I'm the president of Race Forward. I am joined today by our executive vice president, Eric Ward. We find ourselves a week after the inauguration and after the initial executive orders submitted by the Trump administration. This week, we're going to be talking about where we're at in this moment and what it means for us to be resisting the assault on multiracial democracy.
Glenn, it's great to be with you. For those listening, again, this is Eric Ward, Executive Vice President of Race Forward. And as Glenn said, right, today we're diving into the challenges and the threats faced by a multiracial democracy as Donald Trump returns to the presidency. And it is a significant moment. And together, we're going to explore the escalating threats posed by these racial authoritarian policies. We're going to talk about how we hold ourselves as leaders and how we hold resilience for our communities and for our colleagues and our allies and our partners in the field. Glenn, I think we should start with the big picture in this moment. Race Forward, along with many others, have spent years planning for this moment. You and I talked about this possibility 4 years ago. We called it the worst case scenario. Here we are. We have plans, but people are feeling real things in this moment. What are you seeing out there? Help us understand the moment, not just executive orders and propaganda, but how is it being received by our movements and our leaders and our communities? What's the state? How should they understand what they're feeling?
So appreciate that, Eric. To your point, I think those of us who have been holding this as a worst case scenario for our country for 4 years or longer still doesn't change the impact of what these executive orders mean to our community in terms of real potential impact and in the continuing sort of marginalization of Black and brown people, of women, of the LGBTQ community. So, I think so many of the folks that I've had a chance to engage with feeling this in real ways, to your point. It's not just the fact that it's harmful. It feels personal. It feels in that way mean-spirited. And so I think one of the things that for me in this moment feels so important is that we stay centered and that we're clear about what the implications of the intentions of the executive orders are. And so what I'm naming there, and you and I have talked about this, is that at their core, it really is about shock and awe. They are designed to throw us off our game. The overwhelming number, the cruelty that is named in them, it is designed for us to feel overwhelmed, and it's designed to generate a sense of hopelessness. I say that because I think it's so important that even as we hold the pain of all of this, that we are really clear about how important it is that we don't lose sight of the need for our resiliency, which I have to say, have been inspired in talking to folks, and the clarity of action, what we need to do to respond to this moment. And so, for me, Eric, as I'm holding this, I make no mistake about it. This is an all out assault on racial and social justice and our core principles of democracy. And I'm really clear, I'm inspired by not only people's resiliency, but the importance in this moment for pausing, centering ourselves in our communities, reminding ourselves of the history of struggle and fight that our communities come out of, and steadying ourselves for the fight ahead. But I also want to turn back to you. What do you think? What are you seeing out there that this means for racial justice leaders?
It means so much. If you are not reeling from this moment, it is because you do not recognize the seriousness of the moment we are in and what it means for our communities. It is a natural, honest response. And I think we have been raised in organizing to see those moments as a deficiency, right? Fear or anxiety, apprehension, the heaviness of the moment. It is like you have said, we are dealing with folks committed to exclusion and rolling back the civil rights gains over the last 75 years for all Americans. And we have to understand that in that fear and anxiety, that we can still move forward, that it's natural, but it's forward. So I like to start with the big picture when I think about this moment. There is what is happening, and then there is also how we need to show up as racial justice leaders in this moment. I think about the storm clouds we saw forming a decade ago, 30 years ago, for some of us, Glenn, you and I, organizing in the Pacific Northwest at the moment. Groups like the Brennan Center for Justice, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Lawyers Committee, the Leadership Conference, Color of Change, the list goes on. Many have been warning about the systemic attacks on democracy, voter suppression, election subversion, you name it. And some of us took those warnings seriously. Truth is at the end of the day, if you can see the storm clouds, you can't be surprised when it rains. And that's where we are as leaders. That planning wasn't just about predicting what would happen. It was also about building the infrastructure for resilience. I think about the Urban Institute out there who called this adaptive resilience, preparing communities and organizations to weather these crises while continuing to fight for equity. I think the lessons in this moment for leaders is understanding our role is to not spread the fear. We can hold it. We can admit that we have it, but our job is to move forward in action. There's no answer in fear. Fear will create spontaneous reaction rather than well thought out steps that build resilience for our communities. Preparation isn't defeatance. It's a point of defiance. And for those who haven't yet prepared, this is your moment. It's about saying we're ready to act, not just react, and that we're building lifeboats that have room for everyone who is willing to paddle. And we at Race Forward are ready to hold those organizations and leaders who need the space to plan, who need a space to be able to express what they're feeling, those fears and anxieties, so that we can tap into those and acknowledge those and help transform them into the strengths that leaders will need to safeguard their communities and one another, at least for the next 4 years. I think it's important to start that process about talking about the first week of the Trump administration. It's been chaotic, Glenn, as you know. And I'm curious, I think it would be helpful for folks to understand what stood out to you.
One of the things that we did in thinking about this moment was tracking and paying attention to what the executive orders actually mean in their details. And, I really appreciated, again, the number of entities, the number of sister or partner organizations have done a brilliant job in tracking the implications of the executive orders. But what really stood out to me, Eric, was two things. One is that the sheer number of them really designed just to create that sense of throwing folks off balance. The second piece is, while some of them are truly deeply disturbing, they run from the disturbing to the absurd. And I think it's important to hold that. I think many of them were as intended to not only move policy, but to move the narrative, or at least try to move their narrative to actually simply trolling of our communities. The core pieces that I think is critical that everyone takes away is that there is a whole set of EOs that are really around reinforcing making real Project 2025. And if folks are not familiar with Project 2025 or are looking for additional information about Project 2025, I would encourage you to visit our website, raceforward.org. We released a report at the end of last year that was really laying out how Project 2025 was a racial authoritarian guidebook for what takeover of the federal government really meant and could look like. And so a whole slew of BEOs are really about the assault on federal employees, on democratic practice. Second slew, really core focus, is attack on diversity, equity, and initiative. And the focus ranging from both internal to federal government, but also threats to the public sector and the private sector in participating in diversity and equity and any initiatives of inclusion. The core reality of those EOs, in my mind, Eric, is really centered around an assault on the core ideas of racial justice, the 75 plus years of advancements we've made since the civil rights era, and undermining what it means for us to be able to be participating in a real democracy. There were a bunch of other EOs, and I don't want to lose them. There are, EOs on gender, on the economy, on the environment, and of course, a whole slew of EOs specifically around immigration. But I think what's really important in my mind is that folks not see them as just a loose array of ideas, but literally a core narrative on the intentions of what racial authoritarianism looks like in this political period. The thing that I want to lift up is that, again, I've been so moved by is the immediate response that we see coming from our communities. There's already legal responses underway, challenging many of the EOs. There's a lot of folks putting in time and energy thinking about just education. Do you understand what these things mean for us collectively? The collective benefit of what diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives actually mean for Americans. The other piece that's been critical, and for me, I'll just say the most immediately heartbreaking, is looking at the attacks and firings of government employees, of federal government employees. And so really have appreciated the rallying cry of how do we support the very people who support us. The last thing that is critical in this moment, and we see a lot of, and is going to be critical in this period, at least for the next 4 years, is how are we sending ourselves in solidarity? How are we building stronger coalitions? How are we actually building a network that is really capable, both nationally and essentially locally, at being able to hold this line as the reality of these EOs begin to actually roll into our communities? What would you add to your thoughts, reflections on the release of the executive orders?
Look, I think the release of the executive orders was very, very shocking, even for those of us who were prepared for it, right? Honestly, the sheer speed of Trump's pen has been fast, but not as fast than the progress we have been spending decades building equity and movement. I agree. The list of executive orders attacking diversity, equal opportunity, women, the trans community, immigrants has been overwhelming. But the truth is we're not going to allow executive orders, whether they're 100 or 200 or 500, dictate fairness or the building of an equitable society. They may call it wasteful, but we call it justice. And it's not just DEI, as I said, immigration policies are being targeted. A push to end birthright citizenship should be especially alarming for those of us who are Black in this country. We are seeing from immigrant leaders just how terrifying these policies are. People are afraid to even go to church on Sunday. We talk about the attacks on gender and the LGBTQ rights. Their rhetoric is about protecting women, but we know it's a smokescreen for erasing trans and non-binary people. And we need to call it out. It is erasure disguised as protection. When they tell us that they are protecting women, check and remember and name the lives that they are choosing to erase. This is a very real moment, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Race Forward. And we have been busy at work trying to really figure out how we move forward. And what comes forward for me, Glenn, in this moment is really the idea of understanding that we can't act inside of our fear, that at the end of the day, we have to move forward. And fear has a way of sneaking into our work in this moment. And I think that we are dealing with an administration that wants that it feels safer to stay in critique rather than move in action. And Race Forward is seeking to move into action. That mindset, critiquing one another, refusing to acknowledge the moment, undermines trust. It sows division and it will create unnecessary barriers to progress. It is important for those listening, whether you're an activist or whether you're a leader in philanthropy, in government, within community organizations, to have a strategy. We have a strategy, and as a transparent organization, we have shared our strategic plan on our website. You can go to raceforward.org. You can look under About Us. You can go to the strategic plan and let it serve as a model for building your own plan, a plan that understands we are experiencing the storm, but resetting and implementing a plan that moves you forward as an individual, as a community, as an organization. Stay grounded in your purpose. Be mindful of how fear manifests within us internally, power struggles, personal attacks, efforts to create division are distractions. They're signs of fear and not leadership. We can't let these dynamics take root in our own lives or within our organizations or within our communities. We have to stay grounded in our mission and in our strategy. But I think there's something else we have to hold in this moment, that as we reset, let's remember why we're here. We're not here for titles or comfort. No one joined the racial justice movement or any other social or economic justice movement or the environmental movement for comfort. We are here because we believe that justice, equity, and solidarity strengthen democracy. So, in short, I think we're shocked. I think we're reeling, but our goal right now is to anchor ourselves in the shared mission of your organization or your community or your own personal mantra. Support each other when someone else is struggling. Meet them with compassion, but don't let the fear pull you off course, and stay focused forward. The chaos we see is meant to distract us, right? We have to stay disciplined and build towards a future we know is possible. That is the work ahead of us. It won't be easy, but as you have said, there are times that have not been easy in the past. There will be times that won't be easy in the future. That's not to say we have been in this moment before, but there are lessons in the past for us to learn. And there's visioning around the future that we have to continue to hold. It is just a moment we find ourselves in, but how we meet this moment is way more important than anything else this administration may seek to do. And we have to hold ourselves and to find those moments. We should be celebrating each other's work. We don't do that as movements and institutions and leaders. But I can guarantee you, we are moving in a moment where some will be openly hostile to the idea of racial justice. And we have to celebrate. I remember something a family member recently just told me, which is when they push hard, it's because we have moved the line, not because we have lost, but we are here because of the victories that have been made. And that's what we're seeing today. Folks need to hold that. We are seeing a backlash against the gains towards a society of inclusion and fairness. These attacks are not just an effort to undo progress. They are a reaction to the power of the racial justice movement. That's where we find ourselves today. And I hope folks will look towards tools and resources at Race Forward or another organization. But the sin, I think, Glenn, is the sin of despair in this moment, belief in the accepting of the propaganda of exclusionists that we have lost a multiracial democracy. Glenn, how do people hold on to hope? What do you think are the core components? Not false optimism, but the hope that's needed that allows us to continue our work each and every day.
Hope is so critical. It's rooted in the very idea of the struggle, right? That there's always a better tomorrow that we can build. I think in that way, staying clear in our vision is the most important thing we can do. When I'm shaky in mine, I turn to folks like you, Eric. I turn to the people I respect, to the people in my life I love, to family, to make sure that I stay clear in the world I know I can build. And I think in this moment, it's essential that we find ways to center ourselves. I also think it's really important that as we do that, that we get clarity, strategic clarity about how we're going to get there. And what I know is that, we at Race Forward, as we think of our work over the next 4 years, will be really centered in what are we actually building, but also what are we blocking? In this moment, it is going to require us to be laser focused on where are the areas that we are blocking and defending, and where are the areas, the opportunities for us to continue to build on the work that brought us to this resistance. I think it's critical that we are in our work, that we're mobilizing communities, that we're clear that we're mobilizing ourselves to defend a multiracial democracy. The civil rights movement, we talk about this a lot, Eric, civil rights movement made profound national changes, but at its core, it was a local movement, the movement in Selma, the movement in Birmingham. We need to be absolutely clear that the defense of democracy, that the demand of justice will always occur and be made real in our local communities. The other piece that I think is essential is, and you named it, is collaboration with similar people, with similar organizations and similar networks who share our values, who are clear in what it is we are trying to build to. Last piece I want to lift up, just because I do think it's essential, is that we really need to think about how we're supporting civil servants in this period. They are under attack. We need to think about how the people who serve us, how we can serve them in this moment, how we can remind ourselves that our institutions are not up for grabs by folks who are dedicated to authoritarianism, to the destruction of ideas like democracy, and want to support oligarchy, want to support the rule of the few? The answer has to be just no. Deeply believe that all of us need as many opportunities to get involved as possible, Eric. And so I do want to lift up again our work on Project 2025. If you're not sure what these texts mean and the design behind them, I want to encourage you to check out our report on Project 2025 on our website. If you are looking for not just strengthening your analysis and understanding, but how do I get engaged? I want to lift up our work with Honest Education, Action, and Leadership. Right now, we are part of a national movement to move a campaign on making our public schools strong. The Public School Strong campaign is an opportunity at the most local level to demand that our democratic practice is real, that we will honor and respect and all who participate, that we'll make real fundamentally what a just multiracial democracy looks like. And that can start in our own neighborhoods. So I want to encourage everyone to support the Public School Strong campaign. Ultimately, I believe that you named it, Eric, that there's two things. Hope is always about where we're at in a moment. And so how we center ourselves in hope is by being clear about the future we are building to and being really clear about where we come from. And I hope for everyone listening to this podcast that you do not forget the history, the hundreds of years of history of folks who have stood up in moments like this and said, just no. We will not accept a future that does not include us all. We will not accept a future that does not recognize the value of everyone's voice. We will not accept a future that's anything short of our dream of a just, multiracial, democratic society in which all of us are thriving. That's our commitment of Race Forward. I hope that you all are able to find people who support you in making that real.
Glenn, there's something you've said to me before that sticks with me. Survival isn't enough. We need a strategy for thriving. I know we're getting close, but before we wrap up, one of the things that I want people to know is first, you're not alone. This is not just happening to you or your organization. There is a movement for racial justice that represents the aspirations of the majority of Americans. And it is working and resisting every day. Also, I want folks to understand that we've shifted the needle towards justice. And that's why this fight is so hard. This isn't the end. It's the next chapter. And it's a chapter we will write together. But to do that, there are things you need to do. And these aren't big things. These are the small steps, the practice steps that are so necessary to being in community together. You have to join a local and national organization because it will allow you to amplify your voice and advocate for policies that strengthen multiracial democracy. Remember, at the end of the day, as Race Forward has constantly pointed out and is clear in its strategic plan, democracy isn't something we have. Democracy is something we do, but it has to be grounded in hope. And Glenn, I'm wondering if you can give us some thoughts on the importance of hope and action and what that might look like for our listeners.
Eric, thank you so much for joining me today, for participating in this critical conversation during a hard week. I also want to extend a deep appreciation to all of those who are listening to us today for your commitment to justice and the fight ahead. I want to end with a quote from civil rights activist Vincent Harding, who's deeply influential in my thinking of justice in the world. The quote is, "I am a citizen of a country that does not exist yet." I hope you will join us in bringing that country into being. look forward to struggle by your side and look forward to what we will collectively build together.
Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Momentum or Race Forward podcast in 2025, and the first episode of what is a new chapter in the fight for racial justice. Make sure to follow Race Forward on social media on Facebook and Instagram. And to support our work, make a donation by texting RFPOD to 44321. That's RFPOD to 44321. Until next time, let's keep the momentum going.